So, ladies and gentlemen, we're locked in Minnesota right now as Tim Walz and Democrats take to the legacy media to spin their narrative. The same so-called insightful rhetoric, all the brainwashing, radicalizing messaging that prompted a 37-year-old mother to completely disregard the well-being of her child and instead decided to put herself in harm's way, defending criminal illegal migrants and Somali fraud thieves who, when it came down to it, could care less about her. And so make sure you smash that thumbs up button. Let me know you love the video. Subscribe to the channel for more and share this video. That way more people see what's really going on. But first, let's start with J.D. Vance as he calls out the legacy media for their demonizing rhetoric against ICE law enforcement officers. Take a listen.
Here. When I was actually walking out here, somebody sent me a photo of a CNN headline about what happened in Minneapolis. And this is the headline. I'm just going to read it. Outrage after ICE officer kills U.S. citizen in Minneapolis. Well, that's one way to put it, and that is the way that many people in the corporate media have put this attack over the last 24 hours. And I say attack very, very intentionally because this was an attack on federal law enforcement. This was an attack on law and order. This was an attack on the American people. The way that the media, by and large, has reported this story has been an absolute disgrace, and it puts our law enforcement officers at risk every single day.
Instead of doing the basic job of what actually happened, the legacy media immediately goes into spin mode. They cherry pick language. They omit key facts. They like to frame the story around emotion instead of accountability, right? And why is this? Why? Because, well, division sells. Better than the truth. We know that. Look at how these stories are covered. They're not asking, what were federal agents doing there? They're not asking, was this a lawful operation? They're not asking, who interfered and why? Instead, the coverage is designed to assign moral outrage first and facts second. ICE agents aren't presented as law enforcement officers carrying out federal law. They're painted as villains, and anyone who interferes is immediately cast as a victim. And any discussion of consequences is immediately treated as cruelty. That's not journalism. That's narrative enforcement. And the dangerous part is what this kind of coverage does downstream. When you spend the entire time demonizing law enforcement, when you constantly imply that federal officers are acting illegally just by doing their job, you create an environment where people feel justified in stepping in, blocking operations, arguing in the streets, or worse. And the media never sticks around for that part, right? They don't own consequences of their rhetoric. They just move on to the next headline. And so when J.D. Vance calls them out, it's not about politics, it's about responsibility. A media that's more interested in dividing the country than delivering facts isn't informing the public, it's agitating it. Right alongside many Democrats who say these agents are disappearing people and that they're masked men tearing families apart. Well, newsflash. Criminals have families too, but that doesn't stop people who believe these things, who are brainwashed by this rhetoric, from being activated by it. Like these two women here. Take a listen.
Could have been avoided. So many deaths, 30 plus more deaths. I don't know the exact number in Venezuela. There were 30 plus numbers that were killed by the ICE agents in last couple of years. So many people, these deaths can be avoided. I watch 4 or 5 hours of news a day, work 16 hours a day, and it's just not enough. Same is happening with public. Same is happening with senates and everywhere. It's just happening everywhere.
Sutu,
this all can be avoided.
Sutu, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Go ahead! Go ahead! Go ahead! Shoot me! Shoot me! Shoot me! Go ahead! Shoot me! Shoot me! Shoot me! You want to shoot me? You want to shoot me? Shoot me! Go ahead! Shoot me! Shoot me! Pepper spray me! Hurt me!
Imagine watching hours of news every night and still having your facts completely wrong. But for the legacy media, that's basically mission accomplished. And in any other situation, the public saw an older woman standing in the street screaming, "Shoot me," at law enforcement officers, the response would be immediate and obvious. People would say, "She's not well." They say, "She needs help." They say this is a mental health crisis, right? And they be right. But in this case, because the target is federal law enforcement and because the politics line up the right way, the basic common sense gets thrown right out the window. And suddenly this isn't about instability. It's about activism. She's just another leftist. But screaming at armed officers to shoot you isn't protest. It's a breakdown, and it's being normalized by the same rhetoric we've been talking about all night. And so here's JD Vance inserting a little bit of what you would consider to be common sense, but unfortunately, not so common. Take a listen.
If everything that you say is true, how does being part of that network justify being shot?
Well, being part of the network doesn't justify being shot, but ramming an ICE officer with your car, that's what justifies being shot. It's not a good thing, by the way, but when you force somebody to engage in self-defense, it's almost a preposterous question. I'm not saying that funding some of this stuff justifies capital punishment. Nobody would suggest that. The reason this woman is dead is because she tried to ram somebody with her car and that guy acted in self-defense. That is why she lost her life, and that is the tragedy. Now, there may be other violations of the law and other penalties that are associated with those violations of the law. For example, if you are funding violence against our law enforcement officers, I'm not a prosecutor. My guess is that's not the sort of thing that earns capital punishment, but it should sure as hell earn you a few years in prison if you're funding the effort to try to assault our law enforcement officers. What is, I'm sorry, guys, what's going on here? You guys are meant to report the truth. How have you let yourself become agents of propaganda of a radical fringe that's making it harder for us to enforce our laws? You just asked me a question that presumed that the reason why this woman died is because she was engaged in legitimate protest. She tried to run somebody over with her car, and the guy defended himself when that happened. Next question.
This is what the legacy media has done, right? They conditioned a segment of the public to believe that everyone ICE arrest is just some innocent, hardworking person, that every operation is some kind of moral injustice by default. And let's be clear, because they love to blur the line on purpose, I'm not talking about someone who only issue is crossing the border. That's the only crime they committed. I'm talking about a felon, murder suspects, child rapists, repeat violent offenders, people with records, people with warrants, people law enforcement has already identified as a threat. But none of that seems to matter once the narrative takes over. Because once the media frames ICE as villains, facts are now optional. Criminal history becomes irrelevant, right? And law enforcement, they're the enemy, no matter who they're actually going after. And that's how you end up with people feeling morally justified obstructing federal officers, right? And when did that become acceptable? When did it become okay? Somebody answer this question for me. When did it become okay to block, interfere with, or warn that law enforcement is coming, knowing full well that officers act on private information, confidential tips, and intelligence the public does not have? These agents in many of these situations, they know who they're looking for. They know why they're looking for them. They know when and where to retrieve them. Here's the key word: safely. But the people screaming in the street don't know any of that. They're just righteous. And that's the most kind of dangerous, a kind of ignorance, confidence without knowledge. What the media and Democrats have done is convince people that intent matters more than outcome. That as long as you feel like you're doing good, consequences don't apply. But here's the reality. Alerting criminals puts officers, neighbors, and families at risk. And interfering makes the situation just more volatile, not less. And turns enforcement into street-level chaos. And that doesn't protect anyone. And it's exactly how you activate people to make reckless decisions, while the media that fed them the narrative walks away untouched onto the next story, continuing to spin the same rhetoric with the help of the Democrat Party, unfortunately, at this point. For example, here's a clip of the ICE agent involved in the Minneapolis shooting who was previously dragged 300 feet by this illegal alien child rapist from Guatemala being harbored by Minneapolis fraud governor Tim Walz under his unlawful sanctuary state laws. Take a listen.
According to a federal complaint, agents were executing a warrant for 39-year-old Roberto Carlos Munoz. They say Munoz entered the country unlawfully, and he also pled guilty to fourth-degree criminal sexual conduct back in 2023 for abusing a minor. Tuesday morning, agents pulled him over. Court documents say he repeatedly refused to comply before a federal agent took out his spring-loaded window punch with his right hand and broke the driver's side rear window. These images show the officer's hand in the vehicle. In this video, you can see the driver take off with the agent hanging from the car, dragging him 300 feet through front yards. These graphic images show the aftermath. A bloody agent who needed 33 stitches for his significant cuts. And now a political battle with a top Homeland Security official criticizing Governor Tim Walz, posting on X, instead of comparing ICE law enforcement to the Gestapo, Walz should be thanking our brave law enforcement. The Department of Justice says a request for Munoz to be held after that 2022 arrest was, quote, not honored by local authorities, and Munoz was released.
Now, really think about this for a moment. Imagine seeing one of these people out there with whistles, following ICE agents around, deliberately alerting someone that law enforcement is coming. Basically telling them the jig is up, get away now. That person slips away, right? And then later, they go on to harm another child. That's the level of recklessness we're talking about here. And just to make this clear, because then they'll try and jump and deflect, let's make one thing clear. Of course, no, not everyone ICE arrests is committing crimes at this extreme level. We know. But that's the entire point. The public does not know who these individuals are. They don't know criminal histories. They don't know outstanding warrants. They don't know what law enforcement knows. Federal agents operating with information you don't have, intelligence records, confidential tips, ongoing investigations. And so when random activists decide they're going to interfere, warn suspects, or obstruct operations because they feel morally right, they're not helping anyone. They're creating chaos. They're increasing risk. Not just for the officers, but for innocent people who never even know how close they came to danger. This is why law enforcement exists in the first place, right? But let's jump into Scott Jennings. He makes an excellent point about all this chaos. Take a listen.
I agree with you, Jonathan. I think there's some details we don't know yet, and we'll have to learn more about it. What strikes me is, first of all, it's extremely sad and unfortunate that someone died. I mean, the political fighting and disagreements aside, it's terrible. You don't want people to die in law enforcement situations or otherwise. But it strikes me that we are undergoing an epidemic of political vigilanteism right now. Why are people showing up in vehicles, in convoys, not just in Minneapolis, but all over the country in an effort to obstruct lawful federal law enforcement activities? This is not an isolated incident. We have had hundreds of car rammings against ICE agents all over the country. According to DHS, this lady in this car today, along with other vehicles, had been tracking ICE agents around. Why are people believing that they can drive their car into a federal law enforcement situation and that is an appropriate thing to do? I understand they don't like the fact that these agents are enforcing existing immigration law, but that's not how we change laws in this country. If you don't like a law, you talk to the politicians. You don't drive your car into the middle of a building or a law enforcement situation that's being occupied by the people who are simply there to enforce the law. If I don't like how much the IRS is charging me in taxes, I don't drive my car into the Treasury Department and try to run somebody over. I call my congressman. Political vigilanteism is being encouraged by Democratic officials like the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, Peggy Flanagan, who earlier this year told people to, quote, put your bodies on the line, and Tim Walz calling these guys Gestapo all year. What do you think happens when you radicalize a base of people about this? It does strike me.
This is the glove compartment of Renee Good, 37-year-old mom, 3 kids. She wasn't a terrorist. She wasn't a criminal. She was a mom. There's no weapon in that glove compartment. There's no knife, no gun, no explosive. There's stuffed animals. Any one of us with young kids knows what that glove compartment looks like.
Yeah, she was a 37-year-old mother with a child. And they're reporting the father passed away a few years ago. So this isn't some kid with no responsibilities. And she made the decision to go out and insert herself into a federal law enforcement operation, to play games with agents whose job is to deal with dangerous situations. And listen, I'm sorry, but that's not protesting. That's just reckless judgment. And I'll be honest. When I think about these situations, you could understand this when you see this coming from some sheltered college kid. They're out and they're protesting. They still live in their parents' house. They're brainwashed by activist professors and social media slogans, and they just want to hop on the trend and think they're doing a cool thing. You could even understand it coming from someone with nothing to lose, someone drifting through life, blaming the system, right? Corporations, they're the ones who are the cause of all their failures in life. But this wasn't that. This was a grown adult, a mother, someone with real responsibilities, and somebody depending on her. I'm sorry, but at that point, your ideology stops being an excuse. When you have a child relying on you, you don't get to play revolutionary in the street. You don't. You don't get to chase confrontation. And you don't get to gamble with your life over narratives pushed by people who don't give a damn about you or your family if things go wrong. Let's be honest. And that's what makes this so unexcusable to me. Because the people pushing this rhetoric, they aren't the ones paying the price. They're not the ones left behind. They just get to move on. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your comments down below. Don't forget, smash the thumbs up. Let me know you love the video. Subscribe to the channel for more and share this video. That way more people see what's really going on. And until next time.